everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today we're back with romance author and poet Deidrea Dewitt. Thanks for joining us today, Deidrea.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Good to have you back. And today I want to talk all about aesthetic philosophy, storytelling, and its effects on the audience with you. So, Deidrea, how would you say that Nietzsche's philosophies on art and the human condition have influenced storytelling, particularly in how you design your narratives?
If you read The Birth of Tragedy, this is Nietzsche's first book and his biggest work on aesthetic philosophy. It doesn't really affect how I write exactly, but it does help me understand what the audience is expecting and what the audience kind of gleans from storytelling. So Nietzsche splits up art in two forms, the Apollo and the Dionysian.
Mm,
And so you have Apollo, who's the god of light and the god of truth, and you have Dionysian, which is a celebratory wine god, basically. And so what you have is Apollo is the truth of existence and the individual. And then you have Dionysian, which is basically music, because in Greek theater, you would have these musical interludes, and that was the Dionysian part. And so music is very unifying. Music will unify an entire audience. And if you've been to a concert, you would understand this feeling of being unified with everyone around you and the music and the people on stage. And so this is a unifying, celebratory sort of feeling. And so you use these two as an artist in order to heal the audience. And
mm,
so the audience that comes in is suffering, basically, because life is suffering and truth makes you suffer more. And so in order to survive suffering, you have to have truth, but you also have to have a celebration of life. And so
mm,
according to Nietzsche, the the goal of the artist is to balance this pull between Apollo and Dionysian. And so the audience has some relief from suffering, but they aren't escaping suffering. They're dealing with suffering. They're facing suffering and saying, yes, even though life is suffering, as a unit, we can still overcome it. And so that's kind of the idea of actors. And actors go on stage and they represent suffering, and we can watch these actors suffer instead of ourselves, so we're not
mm.
suffering, right? And so we're distanced from this suffering, and we can watch it on stage, and we can kind of purge ourselves of this suffering and understand it better.
Interesting. And I want to transition a little bit to talk about Aristotle and his emphasis on the catharsis in storytelling to create a lasting impact on your audience. Can you explain to us a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So Aristotle's Poetics is all about mimesis and catharsis. And so mimesis is basically the idea that art is a representation of reality. It's not actual reality. And if you look at The Birth of Tragedy by Nietzsche, Nietzsche says that reality is not reality because we have things like dreams. And so dreams give us this look into a separate world that isn't this world. And so mimesis is like a representation of a representation.
Mm,
And so if you have good mimesis, if you have good imitation, then the audience feels absorbed into it and they feel like they're the actors, they're the ones that are the main characters, right? And so when you do that and you put these actors on stage or these characters on stage, then you get the catharsis. And what catharsis is a lot of people will translate it as the purging of emotions. But
mm,
in the Aristotelian idea, it's more of the purging of imbalanced emotions. And
mm.
so we carry around all of these imbalances of kind of anger and pain and even like positive things like too much love and obsession, things like that. And so when we watch these representations of ourselves on stage, uh, doing actions that we can't do in real life because we might go to prison, right? So
Right.
uh, when we watch them do that on stage, it heals us because we get to watch it play out, and we get to watch it play out either with tragedy or with heroism, or something great happens or something terrible happens. But there's no risk to us. And so that
Mm.
creates a rebalance of emotions in the audience.
Mm. And on the note of emotion and romantic suspense, how can aesthetics play a crucial role in the story?
Oh, yeah. So aesthetics, by definition, is the study of how we interact with the world through our senses, right?
Mm.
And so romance and suspense are both genres that fully use senses. So you have romance, which is pleasurable senses, and then you have suspense, which is more uncomfortable and unknown sensory. And
Mm.
so when you put those two together, you kind of give your audience a roller coaster of emotions because you have pleasure and you have uncomfortable together. And so you have to translate those two types of senses together. And that's what makes it more intense for the audience.
Does that typically balance the plot-driven and character-driven narrative?
Well, it's interesting because Aristotle believed that plot was the most important part of a story. And I would agree with him as long as it's a character driven plot.
Mm.
But Greek plays were a little bit different than the stories and media that we ingest now. And so I would say, from the Aristotle point of view, we still use the upper and lower limits of a plot. So in Aristotle's view, you have the lower limits of a plot. So basically, something either really bad happens to the character or something good happens to the character. And that's where the fate kind of switches. And that's the lower limit. And then you have the higher limit, which is basically you have one plot line. So the audience doesn't get confused. If you have too many plot lines, then the audience gets lost. And so we still use that in aesthetics. And that keeps the plot contained in a way that the audience can walk away and feel good about.
And what's the main way that you approach this balance in your own work?
Well, for me, I just kind of focus on the three act system, which actually a lot of people give Aristotle the credit for that. And it's kind of true. He didn't really create the three act system, he created the beginning, middle, and end system, which
Mm.
kind of translates into the three act system. But I found that if I just follow that, then it seems pretty balanced. And also, I watch a lot of Korean dramas and Asian dramas, and those are actually really character driven.
Mm.
So I find that American dramas are more setting driven. So you have like a hospital setting or a police station setting or something along those lines. So it's
Mhm.
setting driven. But Korean dramas are more character driven. And
Mm.
so when you watch these kind of shows, you get ideas of how these characters interact with each other and how that balances out the plot and how that drives the plot.
So interesting. Deidre, thank you so much for that wonderful insight on aesthetic philosophy.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's interview with romance author and poet Deidrea Dewitt. Be sure to check out our website for more videos. Wishing you all a fulfilling and successful writing journey.